A new report published by the Institute for Policy Studies lays out just how badly corporations in America have screwed over their own workers in 2021 while doling out cash to themselves, to their executives, and to their shareholders. And to make matters worse, a lot of the money that they utilized to do just that came from us, the US taxpayers. So among their key findings in this study, CEO worker pay, the CEO to worker pay gap, I should say, has grown even wider since 2020. For instance, the average gap between CEO and median worker pay at a sample of 300 low-wage US corporations surged in 2021, rising to 670 to 1, up from 604 to 1 in 2020. 49 of the publicly traded companies examined in this IPS study had CEO to worker pay ratios above 1,000 to 1 last year. So as we know, inequality in America was already pretty terrible, and it exploded further during the pandemic. Just a few more statistics for you to show you how bad this problem really is. Specific examples, like Amazon, for instance, they paid their CEO, Andy Jassy, a staggering 6,474 times more than it paid its median worker in 2021, a year in which the e-commerce giant spent $4.3 million on anti-union consultants. Also, CEO pay at the 300 corporations increased by $2.5 million to an average of $10.6 million last year, while median worker pay grew by just $3,556, rising to an average of, get a load of this, $23,968 as inflation soared to its highest level in decades. So let's just pause for a second. I want you guys to just let those numbers, like absorb those numbers, understand those numbers, understand what it's like, as many of you already do, what it's like to be a worker who shows up every day, works really hard, generates this revenue for these fabulously successful corporations. And you see that disparity between what the executives make and what the median worker makes. And now that you've absorbed that information, let me remind you of what Joe Rogan thinks the real problem is. Let's watch.
One thing that happened during this pandemic was it opened my eyes about human nature. Like, I used to be very pro universal basic income. My thought was, wouldn't it be great if you just had enough money so you could eat and you could pay your rent and then you could pursue what you wanted to? But the reality of human nature came fully into focus when I realized that when some people got all that money from the government, the COVID money, and then they got unemployment, they didn't want to work. You see a lot of people that own businesses that have a hard time finding people work for them. So there's pros to that, right? The pros are people. It's a marketplace that favors the worker, so workers can ask for more money. So you're seeing a lot of places like bars and restaurants and stuff that have to pay more money per hour, which I guess is good as long as the restaurant can stay open.
Now, of course, there's no conversation there about the amount of government money that was funneled into these corporations during the pandemic, while ordinary Americans were actually nickel and dime. So the fact that he's pointing to the meager amount of money that was given to ordinary Americans to assist them during the pandemic and just completely ignoring the reality of the inequality that exists in the corporate world, I mean, it tells you everything you need to know about a man who has chosen to surround himself with a bunch of right-wing idiots who only care about saving money in their taxes while screwing over workers.
Yeah, I want to talk about how I think Rogan got hoodwinked and is a perfect propaganda vehicle, although I don't think he realizes it. But first, the context is super important, guys. The part of the trick there with Rogan is that he's talking about a small business owner, and a lot of us have empathy for small business owners. Some of us know small business owners, and a bar sounds so relatable, right? You want the bar guy and the restaurant person to be able to succeed, etc. But that is not the majority of cases. The majority of cases are giant corporations. So, and it makes it seem like, oh my God, are they out there? Well, if they could stay in business. But wait a minute. Here, I'll give you graphic 4 here. 67% of those firms that they studied spent a total of $43.7 billion on stock buybacks.
Billions with a B.
Yeah.
In 1 year.
which benefit company shareholders and help boost the stock-based compensation of executives. So these are not, the overwhelming majority of these giant corporations are not ones that are like barely surviving. Oh gosh, I hope the local bar owner makes it. They're putting away tens of billions of dollars for the richest people in the world. Meanwhile, the average workers, as Anna explained to you, and now granted, in this study of 300 companies, they looked at, generally speaking, low wage working companies, okay? But even so, $23,000, that's the average, that's not the lowest. That's the average they were paid. Now, if you say 23,000, okay, that's really low. But their CEO only made 35,000. No, but their CEOs on average made over 10 million. And on average, they're giving away billions in buybacks to both shareholders, executives, etc. So I'm gonna take one more example, and that's Lowe's, okay? So I'm gonna read graphic 5 to you guys. So they did buybacks too, and they explain here, with the $13 billion that Lowe's alone spent on share repurchases, the company could have given each of its 325,000 employees a $40,000 raise.
Isn't that amazing?
Instead, its median pay fell 7.6% to just $22,697.
But American workers are lazy, Cenk. American workers are lazy. I mean, they're the ones generating the revenue for these corporations. They're the ones who make these CEOs and these executives incredibly wealthy, along with corporate welfare, by the way, that's given to these corporations from the US government. That's also a part of this equation as well. But like, I don't understand it. Why wouldn't they show up to work every day, get slapped in the face, and then ask their boss, please, sir, can I have another? I don't understand. It must be because they're lazy, right, Joe? They must be so lazy. They don't want to work. They just want to sit around and collect government checks and do nothing. But he doesn't bother to look at the wage theft, the greed of these executives. And look, quite frankly, we should expect this. The system is actually working the way it's supposed to, right? I mean, the reason why executives are paid with shares of the company's stock is because, like that means that they're literally invested in the profitability of the company. The more profitable the company is, the more money they get to make, right? And what's the biggest cost within any company? It's labor. So they have an interest, like that tension between the worker and the employer is there, not because it's by accident, but on purpose, right? And so they always try to find ways to nickel and dime their own workers, even though their workers are the ones generating the revenue for them in the first place.
Yeah, so now he complained about loopholes. Say, oh my God, because of unemployment, they do work to 20 hours, they get a little bit of a paycheck, they get the unemployment. Can you believe the average guy is taking advantage of a loophole like that? But wait a minute, the stock buybacks used to be illegal back in 1982. They then made them legal, and how is it a loophole? Well, when you buy back a lot of your own stock, it creates artificial demand, which drives up the price of your stock. And if you're an executive whose bonus is dependent on the stock of the price of the stock, you're gonna make extra millions of dollars, even though your company isn't doing any better. It's a giant loophole for corporate executives. And they don't just, hey, I barely got by on unemployment in 20 hours, etc. They're shoveling billions of dollars to themselves. And is that talked about 24/7 on Joe Rogan's show or any other show on the right wing? No, it's never discussed, never discussed. The reason why I get frustrated with Rogan is because it's ironic.
Because there used to be hope for him?
Yeah, it is. No, because guys, look, Ben Shapiro is part of the fraud. Ben Shapiro is perfectly smart, he knows all of these things, and he doesn't mind helping to rob you. That's the whole point of Ben Shapiro, right? He's supposed to do propaganda and he's perfectly aware of it. Joe is not aware of it. He gets spoon-fed this stuff by people like Ben Shapiro, because 98% of his guests are right-wingers, right? And so, oh, no, I had some fake left-wingers on, like Jimmy Dore, who agreed with everything the right wing says, right? And so, since he's captured by, and we talked about this before, by his guests, and it's usually audience capture, in this case is guest capture. He's like, oh yeah, man, that bartender story Shapiro told me sounds really good, man. I'm worried about the poor, the bar owners and the small business owners. and he seems more relatable. And that's because he doesn't necessarily have bad intent. When he says like, well, I mean, I hope the workers make more, I think he genuinely means it. And it makes it easier for people to swallow, oh yeah, I mean, he's rooting for the worker, but it really is the son bitch lazy worker that's the problem, right? So spoon feeding him the propaganda helps spoon feed the propaganda to a larger audience, and that's how everybody gets tricked. But at the same time, I don't want you to get too discouraged, because it turns out, generally speaking, everybody's on these sons of guns. So I just said son of gun. What am I, Joe Biden? Okay, anyway, I'm trying not to curse. All right, so CEO pay, is it too much? The American people say resoundingly, yes, of course. And I want to get to why that's important, but Anna, tell us about it.
All right, well, if you look at graphic 8 here, it'll show you how Americans feel about CEO compensation specifically. And as you can see, the vast majority of people who took part in this survey, 73%, believe that CEOs of the largest companies are compensated too much. Only 13% say the right amount. 6% of people who are probably CEOs and executives who took part in this survey say that they're paid too little, and 8% say they're not sure. But it's the classic disconnect that we see among what Americans are experiencing, what Americans are feeling, and what's portrayed in our media. It used to just be corporate media, and now we're seeing honestly, the smearing of these workers and upholding this system that's just inherently unjust and unfair by independent sources now, like Joe Rogan, who might not have raised his hand to be a journalist, but people actually tune in to get the news from him, which is a little terrifying considering how impressionable he is, depending on who's in the room with him at any given time.
Yeah, and so of the people who think CEOs get paid too much, hold on to your seats. 71% of Republicans think the same thing. But when you say the growing gap between CEO pay and worker pay, is that a problem in this country? That's graphic 7. And you see it's an even higher number. So overall, 87% of Americans agree that it's a big problem, including a whopping 77% of Republicans. Now, if you ask people on mainstream media, they would say people saying CEO pay is too much are radical leftists. How do you know it's too much? These are the people who merited it. We live in a meritocracy. If they're rich, they totally deserve. How dare you, you radical leftists? Well, it turns out 77% of Republicans are radical leftists. Who knew? So guys, that is why they do the culture war. Because even Republican voters hate the fact that the CEOs are robbing them. And they notice, that's why you see Tucker Carlson doing fake populism about, oh, big business. The real problem with big business is they like gay people. No, the real problem with big business is they're robbing you blind. That's the real problem. And that's why they do the transports and the Dr. Seuss books. And this is Anna's major point, and she's absolutely right. The culture wars are a distraction from this robbery.